We're good. Good morning. I am Pat Leach, the Director of Lincoln City Libraries, and we are about to enter a statute-free zone. Thank you, Lorraine. My part of our discussion today is to think a little bit about our roles as fundraisers and especially working with people in terms of seeking private support for some of the projects that we do. So I'll be having comments from a couple of areas. One is conversations with the director of the Foundation for Lincoln City Libraries. Her name is Gail McNair. She's pretty much an expert on raising funds, and so I sat down and talked with Gail about some of our experiences, some of her experiences raising funds for technology for the library. I realize that it's a real luxury to have an executive director of your own foundation, but what I think is true is that the things that Gail brought forward are things that are very generally applicable. So I hope you find that to be the case as well. Then I know that many of us attended the advocacy training called Turning the Page a couple of years ago, and there were some general ideas from that training that in some ways I found surprising or especially thought-provoking, and I wanted to bring those forward today too. So many of the things I mentioned are likely to be things where it's not an original thought, but this might be a day where, because we're thinking of it in a different context, that it brings forward a bright idea. So that's where these are coming from. Now, hits them where they want it. This is one of Gail McNair's phrases. And I don't know if this is really who Gail McNair pictured when she gave me that little phrase, but the point is that in raising funds, you have to think about the person and whether this is somebody who would be especially interested in technology. Our experience has been that there are people out there who really haven't shown support for the library, but when they were approached about supporting technology in the library, they were interested. Similarly, technology gave us a new ask for some people who had been approached previously and who had maybe turned us down. So maybe they weren't interested in a previous campaign that our foundation was doing, but because this was a new thing, they were willing to listen and respond. I think, too, sometimes having some kind of matching requirement or something like that is really persuasive to people who believe that if they put $1 in, $4 will come out of it. So again, that's a new angle or ask for people who maybe haven't been that interested in donating to the library before. The other thing that Gail underscored is that people really do understand immediately about technology as a connector. That's not really a case that you have to make strongly. People understand that, but it might be that the case you have to make is that you need help supporting it. And again, once that's pointed out to people, they get it, but I think people understand that maybe you received a grant and support to buy technology, to get the initial connections, to get all of that set up, but that in 6 months and 12 months and 18 months, you're going to be needing to invest again. And people understand that. I don't expect that people necessarily understand that our budgets don't really stretch to do that, and so we're relying often on additional support. But people really do understand the library as a connector and technology as a connector. And kind of as Mary Jo mentioned earlier, what may not happen in some places is people understanding the library as where people access technology. So depending on what your town is like, you might have to really make that case pretty strongly for people to say, oh, I hadn't thought of the library. It really needs to be the case that immediately that connection is made. Now, the next points that I'm going to make are from that Turning the Page advocacy training. And this one, that your biggest supporters may not visit the library often or at all. They may never have turned the doorknob to your library. They may never have darkened your door. They may not have ever had a library card. Our foundation's biggest donation came from a gentleman who left over $1 million to the foundation, and we did not recognize his name. But he was somebody who supported what the library did, and over the years had designated the library as his beneficiary. It also then underscores for each of us the importance of being out and about talking about the library. So there may well be people in each of our communities who don't use us, but who have this idea about how great the library is, and maybe they have a memory of what it did for them as a child. They might have a memory of how it was the university that their stepmother was able to access because of the public library. There might be some little experience in their past that has made them love the library even though they currently don't use us. So when we're thinking of the technology piece, some of these people who feel great about the library but haven't been there, again, may need to be told the connection now between library and technology and between access to internet and the library. So again, the importance of being out and about. What a lot of those people value is access. So all the people in this picture should have access to a public library. And sometimes we forget, because we're so accustomed to that idea, we forget that in our communities, that's what people love about us, is that really anybody can use us. We'll have it, and whoever's out there can make use of it. I think, too, going back to what Mary Jo said about those benchmarks and that finding that the people who use internet in the library are just a wide swath of the population. The picture of that whole group looks like the picture of our communities. Providing that access and valuing that access and protecting that access really means a lot to people, whether they can articulate it that way or not. It is a little bit hard sometimes to describe the difference between that tax to support basic services and then private funding is supposed to enhance the services. So what's the cake and what's the frosting? And it gets especially tricky when it comes to technology, I think, because we realize that now technology provides a very basic service of internet access as well as other kinds of access through technology. Many of us don't have room in our budgets to provide that, even though we see that it's a basic service. It's not necessarily provided through our tax support. So trying to figure out, okay, then what do we do to make the most use of, say, federal funds or other funds, and how do we describe to people what it is that they're supporting privately? So it may be that people understand, okay, the library got a great new set of computers, so I am willing to enhance that by providing the funding for scanners. Or it might be, okay, the library has got set up so that they have new computers, they have great connections, and now they need some furnishings to make that work. I think that people can kind of understand that basic difference. Our foundation's executive director is always saying people don't want to give money for flushing the toilets and light bulbs. Well, if your toilets don't flush, actually, that might be a way that you could, have a special program. I don't know. But the point there is that people really want to do things that enhance the basic things that you do. And so as we're making that case, we need to show this is how it makes it better, or this is the basic service we provide, and if this were done, we could do that even better. So thinking of what's the frosting and what's the cake here. This point, knowing a passionate librarian influences how much people support the library, is key for all of us. Now, depending on where you live, how big the town is, how much you're out and about, how much you're recognized, you end up being recognized as the library person at the grocery store, at football games, wherever. Or it might be that you get recognized when you're on your way to the pharmacy to get the med that's going to take care of your sinus infection and you can barely talk. And that's when you run into the one person you know might be most interested in your technology program. And somehow you have to find it within yourself to have fireworks, to be passionate, to convey that this is a great thing, even though you're in a context where really you didn't dress up, you didn't wear your nicer clothes, you don't have remarks planned, you don't really want to answer the questions. But it's very important that you do, because whether or not you're passionate about that is going to be remembered by that person. Now, I'd like to mention two things about this. I'm going to have a Katie Couric moment. Okay, now you're thinking, oh no, she's going to talk about colon cancer. Well, I sort of am. I had one of these moments having a test, which shall not be named, but I would just like to say that the nurse had wheeled me into the testing room. I was pretty excited about getting those good drugs, but first the doctor said, now what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm the director of Lincoln City Libraries. And he was like, the library? Miss Mary, Walt Branch Library. My family goes every week. And he was like, Tiffany's the nurse, Tiffany, come over here and tell this lady about all that downloading you do. He's like, is Tiffany the girl with my drugs? I'm just like, please. But I think that each of you can picture the times when you were out and about, you had a library moment when you least expected it, and it's so important that when those happen, that you are able to respond with some increased level of energy. People remember when someone is passionate. The other point about that I want to make is, again, building on what Mary Jo said about sometimes people don't have the imagination to make the link between certain things. So, again, we're in our libraries every day. We're seeing all those people use the internet. We're seeing them use technology. We know what a difference it makes, but sometimes we have to then provide that picture to other people so that then they can use their own imaginations to think, oh man, if people go to the library for that purpose, here's another way in which that could be used. Here's another way that the word could get out. It might be some new ideas for collaborations. It might be building on programs that you already offer. It might be that somebody else comes in to say, well, you know, if the library has all these computers, then our group could help to make this work better in this way. And it might be that they just didn't have a chance to imagine that. The other part, I would say, is showing what a difference you make. Now, in this picture, you know, it might just be that somebody handed out umbrellas to these people, and that guy in the middle, you know, didn't get an umbrella. We could say, well, you know, the difference here is that some people got out of the rain. Well, we could also tell the story that we handed out an umbrella. All these people made it to their job interviews. They got the job. We transformed their lives. And really, that might play a little bit better than, yeah, we handed out umbrellas. So showing what a difference you make is really key. I think that often the job example comes up quite a bit when you think of how many people have to apply for jobs online. That's something that we talk about quite a bit. Getting certain kinds of benefits, applying for certain benefits is something that happens online. It's really key that people understand then the difference it makes. I mean, sometimes it's not quite that life, it's not quite so much about food and paying the bills. You know, we've introduced several grandparents to Facebook and posting pictures and seeing pictures, and the look on someone's face, you know, when they get to see the video of a grandbaby or a great-grandbaby is fabulous. I mean, that is clearly a difference maker for them. So we need to show what a difference that is. It's not just a matter of, yeah, come to the library, use our computers. But it's, you know, here's what the difference is. Here's how this will make your life better. Here's what you'll see if you come. Take a look at what happens here. This summer I attended a conference where the topic was telling your story. And they said there need to be 3 parts anytime you tell your story. So here are the 3 parts. Are you ready? 1, you can tell what the story is. So you might tell a story about a woman who came to your library to use the computers to apply for a job. Then, number 2, add in some kind of statistical information. It might be 90% of jobs in Hamilton County are now available only through online applications. So somebody's story, a statistic, and then a call to action. So that's number 3. So we helped this person get a job in this town. 90% of the jobs in this town must be applied for online. 3, we need your help in ensuring that we're able to not only provide those computers, but have staff people who are available to help that person use that computer in a way that's going to help them get a job. So those 3 things, the story itself, a statistic to support it, and then a call to action in terms of what needs to happen next and how that person can help. But basically, my whole line here is tell your story. So we need to be thinking about how we do that. We need to do it positively. And it really is a good thing that certain services we offer are so popular that we have to add, we have to enhance, we have to do more. One of the other things that Gail McNair, our Foundation's Executive Director, says a lot, and this kind of applies to Richard's slide, people do not support sinking ships. So her point there is, despite a really great slide, I would add, what Gail means there is that if you, for instance, need to seek some funding to make a service viable that maybe has fallen off of its best time. So say you're in a position where the technology that you have has gotten slow, isn't able to run the programs that people want, isn't able to do the applications that people need. And basically what you need to say to people is, this isn't working. We have got to have somebody to make it work. Well, the way you want to put that is not so much saying we're the sinking ship, but you need to say people in our town need these services. We are a place they can go for those services. If you help us enhance those services, if you help us make these better, if you help us help other people, great things are going to happen. That's the angle that we need to take, not an essentially negative angle that, you know, kind of makes people think, man, I'd rather have a colonoscopy. Anyway, oh, I wasn't going to mention that, was I? Sorry. One of our experiences has been that of our customers who use internet, we hardly had to say anything. We didn't really have to put up a million posters. We didn't have to go telling people. Word of mouth got people into our libraries about internet use and that we have it available. But word of mouth isn't getting the word out that we need help to continue providing that. So that's really what our job is, again, telling our story, doing that in a positive way, helping people understand what a difference technology makes, doing that in contexts that are not necessarily what we expect, but that might be a really ripe moment. We really have to get out there and do all of those things. The other part then that comes in afterwards is thinking of the great ways of thanking people who do step up to support us. So I think we know that there are people in our communities who would rather chew glass than be publicly recognized for their generosity. We know that there are people who would love to see their name on a cake. We know that there are people who would love to have a plaque in the library. One of the best parts about what we do is that often we do get to know the people who support us, and when we do, then we can be very strategic and savvy, not only about how we ask them for things, but then how we thank them for those in follow-through. So telling your story, you know, it's more than just a bullhorn. It's also thinking through how do we do that as effectively as possible. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Right. I think we're on to, Krista, do you step up here first to do a little slide work? And then we'll hear from Marcia. Thank you all. It's working out. There we go. Do you want to use the clicker or you want to use the keyboard? Okay, yep, absolutely. Whoops. Yep.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Richard. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for including the Nebraska Community Foundation on the panel. Before I get too far into the presentation, I just want to give a shout out to Tammy and Lori, who I think are with us from Scottsbluff. Is that better? They're at the Bridgeport Public Library, which is the library in my hometown. And I just wanted to thank them for continuing to provide a place where little girls can go to dream big dreams and learn about places in the world where they can go to make them come true. And I'd also like to thank Pat and her staff for doing the same thing, where to provide a place where not so little girls can go to dream big dreams and learn about places in the world where they can come true. So
they're there in Scottsbluff. They say thank you.
Oh, yay! I do have a couple objectives for my presentation. When I'm done, I hope that most of you have had at least one aha about fundraising, and I really echo everything Pat said about telling your story and doing it from the donor's perspective and including a call to action. I hope I'll share some information that that strikes most of you. I think fundraising must be right up there with public speaking and death, and perhaps the procedure that Pat mentioned as one of the things that people fear the most. And I'd like to help make it a little less scary for you, for your boards, for your foundations, for your friends of the library organizations. A good way to do that is to help you understand that you're not alone and that there are resources in the state that can help you with your development efforts. So I'm going to share with you just a few eternal truths of fundraising, give you some information about how the Nebraska Community Foundation can help, and then talk about a grant program, a new grant program specifically designed to help libraries in small towns across the state. So here we go, the eternal truths of fundraising. So what do we know to be true about fundraising that can create a context for success? I mean, really, all we have to do is like write a grant, right, and then have a couple special events, and we'll have all the money we need forever. Well, let's think about that. I realize that, you know, many of us are here, or you've been supported greatly in your technology efforts by the Gates Foundation, but obviously that's going away. However, it does make this first truth a bit ironic. The first eternal truth of fundraising is that people give more money than corporations or foundations. Every year, the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University does a massive study called Giving USA. And I'll admit that that picture hasn't been especially rosy the last couple years, that study on philanthropy in the United States. But one thing that has not changed ever in the history of the study is that individuals, people, give more money than corporations or foundations by a long, long way. In 2010, total giving was estimated to be about $291 billion, which actually was a slight increase over 2009, and individuals gave nearly 3/4 of that money. So that means if you're focusing on grants from foundations or corporate donations as your primary source of outside fundraising, you join all the other organizations who are going after the smallest slices of the pie. So most money, people give more money than foundations or corporations, but surely it's just a few rich folks like Donald Trump and Oprah, right, who account for all of this money, this big blue slice of the pie. Well, no, actually that leads us to our second eternal truth of fundraising, which is that most people give away money. In every country where fundraising has been studied, most people give away money. And in the United States, 7 out of 10 of us give money to charitable causes. So when you walk down the street in your town, whether that's Omaha or Lincoln or Bridgeport or O'Neill or Atkinson or Pender, most of the people you see give money to charitable causes. And if they're not giving their money to you, they're giving it to someone else. So if 7 out of 10 people give, then they can't all be rich people. Just who are these people? The third eternal truth of fundraising is that most money comes from people like us. Most donations and half of all money, half of that big blue slice of the pie, comes from families with income of $90,000 or less. Income is not a predictor of the inclination to give. To paraphrase Pogo, we have met the donor and he is us. So if it's not income motivated, then why and when do people give? This is a very simple truth. People give when they are asked. And they do not give when they are not asked. And Pat had some very, very good advice about the ask. We would all love to believe that the person who just won the lottery will walk into our library and hand us a check for $1 million. But the truth is that asking is an essential part of the process. So I can just send like a letter or an email, right, and ask. Or I'll do a really nice brochure. And I'll send them a really nice brochure. And they will send me money. Is that how that works? Or I'll just have a really nice party, ask them to buy a ticket. That work, right? Well, yeah, that could work. The most efficient use of your time is to just ask. And this slide represents information from 2 different sources that tracks both response to different types of fundraising and the cost per dollar raised. And you can see that special events and direct mail, and this is mailing to folks who've never given to you before, are fairly expensive. You make 50 cents out of the dollar that you might spend putting on a special event. You might lose money the first time you send out a direct mail piece. You might not even cover your costs. But volunteer-led, and this is where it's really important to start engaging your friends' organizations and your foundation boards, volunteer-led personal solicitation has the highest response rate for the lowest cost. Okay. Truth number 5, and this is my favorite. This is probably my favorite truth. Fundraising is not about money. Say what? I mean, fund, that's right in the world. How can fundraising not be about money? Fundraising is about changing the world. I framed this and put it up in my office. Fundraising is not about money. Fundraising is about changing the world. Fundraising is about the good that you do in your communities and how you invite people in to help support it. And Pat had some wonderful comments to say about that. People want to support you because of what you do for your community. You just have to be strategic about the opportunities that you give them, and you have to cultivate those relationships. And the Nebraska Community Foundation exists to help you craft those opportunities. Now, this is not our official mission statement, but it is what keeps me coming to work every day. As you heard, I grew up in a small town, and what we do every day at the Nebraska Community Foundation is to help people give back to the places they love, whether they live there or not, in time, talent, and treasure to create thriving rural communities. We have a network of more than 200 affiliated funds across the state, serving 230 communities in 77 counties. And more than 1,000 volunteers work across the state to support the communities where they work and live. The Nebraska Community Foundation is a private, nonprofit organization. We're independent. We're not part of the state. We're not part of any other association. We're a private, nonprofit organization. How do we work with communities or organizations such as libraries and communities? Well, our approach is to work in partnership with communities, organizations to help you accomplish your goals. You know, I said we work to create thriving rural communities. We don't dictate what those communities would look like. We don't come in with an agenda. We know that success looks different in every place. We're asset-based. We focus on what's good and working in your place. You know, a few weeks ago, the Journal Star ran its annual "The Sky is Falling Over Rural Nebraska" article, and I'm really glad they got it out of the system. Now we're done for the year and we can just continue with our work, because while people are running around saying rural Nebraska is dying, we're busy working with communities all across the state who are proving them wrong. We are community-driven, as I said. The community or the organization sets the agenda, and we help them organize to make it happen, to help them realize their vision of success. So exactly how does that work? As I said, we have a number of affiliated funds. As an organization, such as a Friends Group of a library or a 501c3, but most of our affiliated funds are community-based. You affiliate with us, and through that affiliation you gain 501c3 status, which, as we all know, offers a place for people to make tax-deductible gifts to your library. Now, Lincoln's fortunate enough to have their own separate library foundation, but maintaining a separate 501c3 organization is getting more and more onerous, and some of you probably tracked that within the last 6 months there were several hundred nonprofit organizations in Nebraska that lost their charitable tax status because they couldn't comply with the filing requirements for the IRS. We do that for you. We do all the nasty IRS paperwork so you can focus on your work in the community. And if you have an existing 501c3 organization, we can work within that structure to provide support. We provide additional financial and administrative services, like including recording contributions, sending receipts, making disbursements, managing cash and investments, and issuing financial statements. But what really sets us apart from other community foundations that have affiliated fund is the level of training and technical assistance that we provide. We have field staff, there are 3 of us in the department, but we have a number of staff who work with organizations and communities on strategic planning, donor development and fundraising, plan giving, marketing, and communications. I won't say that we're exactly like your executive director of your library foundation, because we do work all across the state, but we do provide a number of services that will help the people who want to support you in your effort, whether that's your friends group, your foundation, or your library board, help you organize to raise funds for your library. And the other part of that is access to that peer learning network of over 1,000 volunteers that I talked about. People that have rich experience raising money for all kinds of causes in their organization and are very willing to share about their experience. One of the reasons I asked the question about the sinking fund and who controls it is that in this case, if in an affiliated fund with the Nebraska Community Foundation, you and your board and your supporting organizations decide how the money is spent. If it's raised for you and you have an affiliated fund with us, you decide how it's spent. The Nebraska Community Foundation, as long as it complies with all of the regulations for charitable giving, does not decide where that money goes. So what are some options for libraries? So affiliation is one option. Oh gosh, look what time it is. What did I do?
Just click anywhere else on the screen. It should go Why didn't it come up? There.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know.
I must have fat fingers this morning.
There we go. Try it again.
Sweet. All right. So there are actually 3 options for support. Many of you are in communities where there are existing community-based funds that make grants in your communities. And I actually did a quick tally from the registration list and found out that 30 of the communities that are represented by people attending across the state are in places where we have affiliated funds. So our community-based and donor-advised funds, we have some donor-advised funds that support a specific geographic place. You could apply for a grant from that community-based fund, or develop a relationship with the volunteers who work with your community-based fund and help them, just as Pat was saying, help them understand what the needs are for your library, so that they'll be more informed and better aware of what your needs are when grant-making time comes. Another option is, if you are in a place where we have an existing community-based affiliated fund, you can create an account within that fund specific to the library. So people can donate specifically for library improvements and projects through the local fund. And if you don't have an affiliated fund in your community, you can set up your own affiliated fund. So there are several different ways that you can access our services. We currently have 21 library-specific accounts within 13 community-based funds, and 10 of those 13 communities are represented at this conference, so I'm very happy about that. But that means there's another 20 libraries out there who have community-based affiliated funds in your community, and you don't have an account with that affiliated fund. So if you want to know who you are, I can help you with that. We also have 2 donor-advised funds that are specifically designated, for library support, and 1 organizational fund. And in total, we hold about $3 million for the benefit of libraries across Nebraska. Now, about $2.3 million of that is endowed, and that's exciting. We really encourage, and that's our main focus, is to work with communities and organizations to build endowments that will provide sustained support over time. This level of endowment means that between $80,000 and $100,000 is coming back to support libraries in Nebraska annually, and will continue to come back every year. And that really is the power of an endowment. Just a couple quick success stories about endowments and or libraries that work with the Nebraska Community Foundation. The Harry and Grace Moeller Library Endowment Fund was set up several years ago as a result of a bequest. And that the language in that bequest was very carefully crafted to ensure that the funds would be used only to supplement and not to replace government support, as Richard was mentioned. And Grace Moeller, the donor, was very emphatic about that. So our planned giving officer worked with her estate planning advisors and worked out that language. Over the years, the endowment has grown and today returns about $26,000 every year to support programs and improvements at the Morton James Library in Nebraska City, including the renovation of the library to include the technology center that you see here and the Dolly Parton Imagination Library program providing books to preschool children. So while the Morton James Library does have its own separate foundation, the Moeller Endowment account is housed within the Nebraska City Community Foundation Fund, which is an NCF affiliate and also provides support to the library. Next, back out in my old stomping grounds in Keith County, and I think Diane from the Paxton Library is with us in North Platte, so shout out to Diane. 2 libraries in Keith County have accounts within the Keith County Community Foundation Fund, the Goodall City Library in Ogallala and the Paxton Carnegie Library. The library in Ogallala has both endowments and a general account, and even though they have a friends group, their account essentially functions as the foundation for their library, supporting their local library. They also have an account that's specifically to support the children's library within the Goodall City Library. I include Paxton on this slide because if you're saying, well, gosh, we just don't have enough money to start an endowment, why would we ever do that? It has to be probably $500,000 or it won't do us any good. Well, the Paxton endowment account is just over $10,000, is currently just over $10,000. I know it can grow because I know the people in Paxton, but it's currently just over $10,000, and that returns between $350 and $450 every year, and that's when you're talking about technology. That could be a new computer, that could be a new software program. So don't think that any amount of money is too little. I think it's sort of like what they say about planting trees. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. So, again, there's potential in every place in Nebraska. One of our most successful affiliated funds is in Shickley, Nebraska, which has 376 people, and they are shooting for, their 20-year goal is to have a $12 million endowment to support their town. They are almost a third of the way there. 376 people, and they consider their school district, their area, half the people in their school district have donated to their community foundation fund. So the size of your place does not matter. This slide is an illustration of the transfer of wealth, which is a tool that we use often in endowment building. In places like Nebraska, a lot of the wealth lies in land and assets, and wealth transfers between generations when people pass away. So if children are no longer living in the community, the wealth leaves the community where it was created. Now, if you look at this slide, the green line with the dots is the transfer of wealth trend line for the United States as a whole, and it never really goes down. The blue line with the triangles is the line for Nebraska, and this study was actually done in 2002. We're updating it this year, and the new numbers will be out in October or November. But in Nebraska, we estimated in the 50 years, the first half of the century, $258 billion would transfer, and Nebraska peaks in about 2035 and then flattens out. But the picture's very different in rural Nebraska. We estimate a 50-year wealth transfer of about $94 billion, but that transfer peaks in 2020 because of the aging demographic in rural Nebraska. The younger people are moving out of rural Nebraska. The older people are staying, and when they pass away, their wealth transfers, and in most cases is transferred to their children who no longer live there. We have, I think, 14 counties in Nebraska that are peaking within the next 5 years. So we're real anxious to help them capture some of that transfer. Many people in that generation, in the older generations, and in fact many of their children would like to support the community where this wealth was created, and they are doing so through a planned gift. It's an excellent way to do that. Many of the communities in Nebraska have used this transfer of wealth information to encourage people to include the community in their estate plan. It's a different kind of an ask than asking someone for a donation of current dollars, but it is a tremendous way to build endowments, and we've seen significant growth in endowments benefiting rural places in Nebraska over the last 5 years. Another reason to think that there's potential in every place, and given the current picture in agriculture, we're finding that gifts of grain and other commodities is an especially attractive option for many ag producers. Nebraska farmers and ranchers can save significant taxes by contributing commodities such as corn or cattle to a charitable organization, we like to say to their community foundation fund, instead of making a cash contribution after selling the commodity. When an agricultural producer transfers legal ownership of grain or livestock to a charitable organization, such as the Nebraska Community Foundation, or for the benefit of one of our affiliated funds, before that commodity is sold, the producer can still deduct the cost of production and minimize their taxes, but they don't record the income from the value of the sale. So I know I'm getting a little technical there. I hope I didn't dip into the statutory language part, but just if you're curious about this, if you're in a rural area or if you're in an ag production area, huge potential, and we're seeing more and more communities and organizations take advantage of this, especially now with ag prices the way that commodity prices the way that they are. Just a few minutes about an exciting opportunity. Now, please don't forget, eternal truth, number one, most money comes from people. But I am going to talk to you about the Kreutz Bennett Donor Advised Fund. This was established through the estate of Shirley Kreutz Bennett, who was a dedicated lifelong learner. Shirley graduated from Harvard High School, and I think Harvard's represented here at the conference. So thank you for giving us Shirley. She earned degrees from the University of Washington in Seattle, and MA and a PhD from Columbia University. She was a retired professor of education at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and she included in her will a significant bequest to benefit libraries in small towns in Nebraska. Grants from the Kreutz Bennett Donor Advised Fund will provide matching grants for public libraries in Nebraska communities with a population of fewer than 3,000. And that language, fewer than 3,000, was in Shirley's estate plan. So if you have 3,000 people in your community, exactly, I would suggest that you ask someone to move. Just one person. I'll just generalize this. I included the grant documents. They should be on your flash drive. But grants, and there's some more details here. I won't read this slide to you, but grants from the Kreutz Bennett Donor Advised Fund will be made in 3 distinct areas. Planning grants, which lead to accreditation. So if we have folks in the audience from non-accredited libraries, we know that becoming accredited opens lots of doors for you in terms of other funding. So that's the first area. And we worked, the Nebraska Community Foundation and the Fund Advisory Committee, which consists largely of Shirley's nieces and nephews, worked with the Nebraska Library Commission to design this grant. So planning grants, enhancement grants, which are basically program grants, and then facilities grants for new construction, but preference actually for rehabilitation or expansion of an older historic facility. The planning grants are, I believe, one-time grants, and the facilities grants are one-time grants, but you can apply multiple times for the enhancement grants. So the guidelines and application forms are on our website. They're also on your flash drive. I will call your attention to the fact that the deadline for the first phase of application is coming up sooner than we think, October 1st. And what we ask, there's a short application form. We ask you to complete that and submit it, and then the committee will review those, and if there's significant interest, they'll ask you to complete a full application. Now, if you apply after October 1st, it doesn't mean you're out of the running, you're just out of the running for this year. So any applications received on or before October 1st of this year will be considered for funding in, I think the grants are scheduled to be awarded in March of next year. And if your application comes in after the 1st of October, you'll be considered for the 2013 round of funding. So what's next? Remember those eternal truths. Most money comes from most people. I'm even forgetting my truths, aren't I? So Most money comes from people. Most people give. The people who give are people like us. So engage the community, ask. If you have questions about the services that NCF can provide to help you in that, contact NCF. Use the information on your flash drive or our website to find out more about Kreutz Bennett if that applies to you. And then think about, is there a Shirley in your town? Is there someone like the people that Pat described who love the library? I still remember the name of the man that donated the money to build the Bridgeport Public Library because his name was on a plaque and he ran the drugstore. It was Mr. Bunn. Mr. Allshouse, we called him Mr. Bunn. So there's people out there like Mr. Allshouse, like Mr. Bunn, who want to support the library. But until you engage the community and ask, you won't find out. So I'm available for questions. My contact information is here, also on your flash drive. So thank you very much.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Actually, we still have another about 10 minutes of this part. So does anybody have any questions for any of our speakers we had here, either from in the room here or from remotely? I do have one remote question that I missed earlier for Richard. Someone from North Platte wanted to know, how is a sinking fund different from a capital improvement fund? Yes.
I don't think there is a great deal of difference. I think the thing I would say is that look at the state statutes, and see what they say, and talk to your attorney to see if there are some distinctions. Because when you get into state statutes, you really have to have an attorney look at it because there are these fine distinctions that I, as an attorney, can probably not know. I don't see any difference. In my way of thinking, they're one and the same, but I think under the law they're not.
Okay, any other questions for any of our speakers from in the room or outside? Yes.
When you talk about the matching funds on this grant, is it, do you have that new funding or can you have existing funding to match?
The question is, can you talk about the matching funds for the grant that Marcia was talking about?
I can. And let's see. Maybe I can. And it depends on the type of grant that you're applying for. With the facilities grants, in-kind is not allowed. Whether it's new money. Now, I thought that, I'm sorry.
Would you like me to speak to those?
Yes, do.
Okay. For the planning grants for non-accredited public libraries working toward accreditation, there's a one-to-one match required. An in-kind match is not allowed. Your question, though, really is, can you use existing funds as opposed to new money? I don't think there's a distinction that the donor advised group would make over that. For the enhancements grants for the programs and services, a one-to-one match is required, and 50% of that match can be in-kind match, which means non-cash match, if you can make a case about that. And for the facilities grants, it's a 3-to-1 match. You have to come up with $3 locally to match $1 from the Kreutz Bennett donor advised fund, and in-kind match is not allowed. So that's cash on the barrelhead, 3-to-1. That's the way it's set up.
And in the documents, there's no distinction made between new money and existing funding.
Yeah.
So if you have an existing support organization that has an endowment account or has some funds available, I think that could be considered. But I would encourage you to contact Sherry Hink, who is the coordinator of that program at the Nebraska Community Foundation. She could clarify that for you. And her email and contact information is on the grant guidelines that are on your flash drive.
It should be, yeah. We do have a question from Norfolk, also for Marcia. What administrative costs does your foundation charge, and is there a charge when funds are released back to the library?
There are administrative fees involved. I mean, I know the Lincoln City Library Foundation pays their executive director, so there are also fees involved in the services that we provide. There are There's a startup fee, and that varies depending on whether you're starting a fund or an account. There's what we call a membership fee that's assessed quarterly. Again, it varies depending on whether you're a separate fund or account. There is a disbursement fee that's involved in dispersing funds for the specific purposes that you've determined. And there's the endowment accounts don't pay the membership fees, but there's an investment fee. So, your situation would be different depending on whether you were an account within an existing fund or your own fund, depending on what was in your endowment. The fees assessed on the endowments are kind of a sliding fee scale based on how much is in the account. What I will tell you is that the fees that we assess account for about half of NCF's total operating cost. So the fees that you pay are heavily subsidized by separate fundraising that we go out and do to support our mission.
Marcia, could I add something there? You guys give detailed accounting of what costs are involved when someone contacts you to find out about costs involved. Do you not?
Absolutely. And I because it is, it depends a little bit on the situation. I hate to quote numbers. I have some information with me. I have a copy of our fee schedule with me if you're interested. But if you're interested in either having a fund or an account, I would encourage you just to contact us and we can go over the fees. Yeah, it's all very transparent.
And we have a question from Scottsbluff, actually, that is mixing some of your presentations. Can you use your sinking funds as a match?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. The short answer is sure.
Money is money.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions here? Since I was sitting down for a little bit. Any questions? For anybody? No? Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
No? Okay. It looks like we don't have any new questions. I think that will wrap it up. Thank you very much, Richard, Pat, and Marcia.
You folks did a really nice job. Thank you.